Welcome to This Prepared Life podcast, where homesteading and the apocalypse meet. I'm Allison, your host. Welcome to This Prepared Life. Hello, everyone. I hope you are having a great day. The goal of this podcast is to encourage, support, and educate women who prep and women who are thinking about prepping. One way that you as the listener can help is to follow this podcast and also to give me ratings and reviews. These ratings and reviews help the podcast show up in suggested podcasts to others, and it just helps get the word out. So if you haven't, please take a minute after the episode. And if you have, thank you so much for your support. I really do believe that everyone should be a prepper or practice preparedness in some way. Today, we are talking with someone who I think is slightly my opposite. For all my ranting that the government is out to get you, because it is, she is over there on Instagram speaking emergency preparedness with knowledge, practicality, and a good bit of humor. JaNae is a wife and mom. She lives in Utah. Welcome to the podcast, JaNae.
Hi, thank you.
I am so glad to have you. And it is so nice to put a voice. I wish I had a face. Maybe I should do video podcasts, but it is so nice to put a voice to all of the posts that I see over there.
Well, if you watch the stories, there's plenty of face there.
Yeah.
My brother called me yesterday. He's like, your stories are too long. You ramble too much. Your information is good, but you've got to cut it down. So my stories tend to get very facey, I guess.
I think I do the same thing. My husband is like, yeah, I didn't watch the whole thing. I'm like, well, fine then.
Yep, I have to tell my husband, I'm like, hey, watch this, tell me what you think. He's like, but it's so long, and I hear you talk about it all the time. I'm like, shut up.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, your family, where you live, what you enjoy doing? Just tell us a little bit about you.
So I'm just a mom, and I know you get a little bit of bad rap for saying just a mom, but that's really all that I've ever wanted to be is a mom. I have 3 kids, my daughter will be 7 in November, and so I have a almost 7-year-old, a 5-year-old, and my baby just turned 1 in September. So we got a really young family. I have a dog. A lot of times I have my siblings' dogs and my dad's dogs just because I'm home all the time. So if they're going to be gone for an extended period of time, the dogs usually end up at my house. So that's basically what I do. I like your whole keeper of the food thing, and I like to think that I'm the keeper of the dogs and the keeper of my children, and I try to be a keeper of a house, but priorities.
Right? You mentioned in your emails to me that you live in the city. Tell us a little
Yep.
bit about, because some of us are homesteaders and we have massive properties, some live in apartments. Tell us a little bit about, your living situation.
So we have a pretty decently sized backyard. We probably could garden there. We have had a garden there once. It gets a lot of shade because there's a huge tree that our neighbors have. But I could garden in like the corner of it, but the last 2 years between having a horrible pregnancy and then a newborn, it hasn't happened the last 2 years. Other than that, we don't really have a space that we could have chickens or anything like that. So, we do have a pretty good backyard, but mostly I can't use it as an actual homestead. I would love to move somewhere that I could have a homestead, but I have to convince my husband that he doesn't need a Walmart and a Costco in the same city as we live in.
You shared with me a little bit about your experience as an EMT and also a friend that you have that works for FEMA. Can you tell me where we're hearing these stories or that experience as an EMT like a defining moment in you deciding to be prepared, or how did you come to the conclusion that you would like to be a prepper?
So, for me, my dad has always kind of not made fun of me, but kind of got a good chuckle out of my love for severe weather. He would wake up early to go to work at like 5 a.m. And I would always wake up at 5 a.m. with him. We would eat cereal together, and I would just watch the Weather Channel because I loved it. I love severe weather. And obviously, with severe weather comes preparedness. You have to be prepared for a hurricane. You have to be prepared for, well, as prepared as you can be for a tornado. Those come out of the blue. But, you have to have that level of preparedness with severe weather. And so that's kind of where I found the need for preparedness was watching the Weather Channel and seeing all the severe weather events. And then when I was an EMT, I don't know that there was ever a defining moment that I can think of, but it was just seeing how life can change in an instant. Like even just from the EMT point of view, I would just be going about my day and all of a sudden our pager would sound and then we'd have to, I'd have to stop whatever I'm doing and be prepared to go on a car accident or do CPR or any number of things. And so it's like, my life just as an EMT can change on a dime because I don't know if I'm going to come across something traumatic that's going to, that I'll live with the rest of the day. And so that's kind of, and then I saw it with other people, in their life when all of a sudden, they would, a super defining moment was, we had gotten calls to a lady who went into cardiac arrest, and we ended up doing CPR on her. And her husband, after we got her to the hospital and they called it, her husband just kept saying, like, I was just talking to her. Like, I was just talking to her. He was in complete shock over it. And it was one of my first calls that I had. And I remember thinking, like, this man had no idea the trajectory his day was going to take. So that was kind of a big moment for me, is like, you never know what the next hour is going to bring. And that kind of fueled the prepping for me, as well as I have a pretty good amount of anxiety, and the more kids I have and the more reliant they are on me, the more I'm like, okay, if something happens, these 3 little kids and a dog are going to be relying on me to keep them safe, to keep them healthy and happy and fed and all of these things in a natural disaster or in uncertain times.
When did you start prepping?
So I started prepping, I got married when I was 23, and that's basically when it started, was when I was no longer living at my dad's house. It was like, oh crap, we only lived, well, I guess at the time we lived about 45 minutes away from our families, and then we moved within 5 minutes of our families. But it was just one of those things where it's like, okay, I'm responsible for me and my husband now. So it kind of started then. And then, like I said, with every kid that we've had and with every responsibility that has become ours, I've taken it as they're my responsibility. They're not somebody else's responsibility to take care of. So yeah, when I was first married, I could have gone to my dad's house or my in-laws' house and been like, hey, we're hungry, we're starving, whatever, please feed us. And they do a fair amount of feeding us anyways. But I don't want them to have to be worried about feeding me and my family in a disaster. Does that make any sense at all?
That makes so much sense. So much sense. Anyone who follows me on Instagram has seen my ranting raves that this is our job. It is our job to take care of our families, and it is not your neighbor's job, and it's your job. So I totally get it. Prepping looks different for all of us. And that is one thing that here at This Prepared Life, I'm like, we don't all have to prep the same. We each get to choose what that looks like for our families. And you used the word practical prepper. What does prepping look like for you?
So prepping for me looks like trying to maintain a normal life in any outside circumstances. So if there's an earthquake, I want to be able to give my kids as normal, as a situation as they knew before, because there's going to be a lot of stress. There's going to be a lot of uncertainty. Going to be a lot of fear. And I want them to know that, hey, just because the outside world is scary doesn't mean that our life is scary, that you're safe with us because we're prepared.
I love that. That's great. Can you tell us a little bit about what that looks like your system, your organization, if you feel comfortable sharing, what your prepping goals are? I know that a lot of people ask me about organization, and I think when you get started on this journey and you start slowly building a stockpile, suddenly you realize, oh, I need to have a way to manage this. What does that look like for you?
So for me, it looks, and I just did a post on this on Instagram. For me, it looks like a lot of short term food storage. So it looks like things that we use on a regular basis. And because that's going to be what's normal for my
Mm-hmm.
kids and what's normal for me. And so I try and focus on what would I need to maintain a normal life if I don't have power? What will I need to maintain, what we have today if there's no groceries at the grocery store? It's just trying to maintain as normal of a life as possible. So for short-term food storage and everything, rotation wise, just looks like a lot of space, because if everything is cramped into one small space, you're not going to be able to rotate through it. So it looks like a whole room dedicated to storage and organization and things like that. And I'm fortunate that I have that kind of space, because I know a lot of people don't
Mm-hmm.
have that kind of space.
Do you use the layer system?
So I don't use the layer system per se. Basically, I guess I do, I just don't call it
Yeah.
that. Because I use the stuff that's in my fridge. We eat a lot of fruits, a lot of veggies, a lot of fresh food. So that's stuff that I buy on a weekly basis all the time. And then I have things that are in my pantry. My short term food storage looks the same as my pantry does. I have my short term food storage, and then I have my long term food storage, which is basically the doomsday stuff, the stuff that nobody really wants to eat unless they're desperate. And that one, I try and focus more on the short term food storage, because if you rotate through it, that will essentially become long term food storage.
Yeah, yeah. You had said something funny in one of your emails to me, and you were talking about the zombie apocalypse and that you were not a survivalist. Do you
No.
want to share that or not?
Oh, I'm happy to share that. So my husband is very much on board with prepping, but he lets me do it because I can get a little bit crazy about it. Like, I'm very particular about it, I should say. And like you always say, I'm the keeper of the food. I'm the one who goes grocery shopping. I'm the one who cooks the meals and everything. So I am the keeper of the food. And so he just lets me prep. However, he trusts my process. He trusts what I'm going to do. And we were watching The Walking Dead. We watched that religiously up until a couple of seasons ago, and then I was done with it. But my husband's like, "Oh yeah, what would we do here?" And I was like, "No, there will not be a what will we do in this situation, because if it comes to a doomsday zombie apocalypse, I am not a survivor. I will off us all." He's like, "So you're telling me I can't sleep because you're just going to kill me in my sleep?" I was like, "Yes. That's exactly what I will do, because I will get us through earthquakes, I will get us through economic collapse, I will get us through whatever, but I'm not going to survive. I am not a survivalist."
I think sometimes when people start prepping, like way at the very beginning, they focus a lot on very specific scenarios. and this is just my opinion. I have no idea if it's right or not. But I think as we all move in our prepping journey and we grow and we learn knowledge, we realize that our preps are not just for a wildfire or a hurricane or the zombie apocalypse. They cover so many things. We don't have to just prep for one thing. When you started prepping, I mean, it sounds like you were just really focused on those weather scenarios. What would you say to new preppers and where to put their focus?
So, where I would say to start and put your focus and everything is truly to just start. There's so many people who are like, okay, I'll worry about that tomorrow, or I'll do that tomorrow. It's like, well, tomorrow never comes. You have to begin and you have to start somewhere. I think that's my biggest pet peeve that I have with people in general is like, just waiting and putting it off. It's like you can't put it off. You have to start. And yes, it's overwhelming. Yes, can be nerve wracking and cause anxiety. But the more you prep and the more you learn, the less anxiety comes with it. And to me, it just becomes thrilling. It's like, okay, I have enough food to last a month. Now what can I do? And it becomes almost an addiction where it's just like, yeah, like, okay, I can do this. And, after I started this Instagram account, seeing all the homesteaders and the canning and the freeze drying and all of this stuff, I'm like, oh, that's what I want to do next. Like, that's what I need to do next. Like, maybe eventually I'll become a survivalist, but I have no desire to. It's not the surviving, it's the people turning evil part that I don't want to see and deal with. So I could survive just fine. I just don't want to see people in that mode.
Yeah. You have children. Are they all younger? How old are your kids?
So they are younger. So my oldest is almost 7, and then my baby just turned 1.
Okay. Do you involve your kids in preparedness and prepping? And if you do, how do you do that?
I do include my children in prepping, and that looks different for every child. So I have my oldest. She is a lot like me. She loves severe weather. She loves preparedness. She loves all of that. And the other day we were cleaning out our basement, and my daughter's found a backpack that was set to go to Goodwill. And she's like, Mom, we can't get rid of that. I can use that for preparedness. And I was like, we do not need another little backpack. She's like, no, Mom, this is something I have to do. And I was like, oh, okay, whatever, fine. Do what you want with it. Just I don't want to see it. And then she puts some applesauce pouches in it. She takes a couple of bottles of water and puts water in it. She has a flashlight that she put in it. She's like, Mom, I need this in my bed just in case an earthquake happens or something happens and it takes you and Dad a few minutes before you can get to us. And I was like, okay, you're just like 10 feet down the hall. We're going to get to you pretty fast. But if that makes you feel good about it, then go for it. So my daughter is all about preparedness. She loves it. My son, who is 5, he is a lot more anxious of a child, and it scares him. And so with him, I focus more on, we prepare so we don't have to be scared. We do all of this because if something happens, we're going to be okay and we're going to be safe and we're going to have food and we don't have to worry. So for him, showing him preparedness looks like making sure he knows that he's safe and that why we're doing this is so he's safe and that everything will be okay. And then my baby, obviously, I don't do any prepping around her because she just demolishes everything.
You know, I know this is totally cliche, but you will miss that one day.
That's what everybody says, and I try and remember that. But when I'm trying to load the dishwasher and she's taking out 2 items as I'm putting one in, it's really hard to remember that.
Yes. I know that feeling all too well. Can you share a little bit about what impact, if any, being a prepper has had on your life?
For me, the biggest thing that being a prepper has done for me is ease my fears and my anxieties about anything. Like I know that we will be okay in any circumstance. And that is very comforting for me. And so that's the biggest reason why I prep. And that's the biggest thing that prepping has done for me is help ease my anxiety and my fear of the unknown.
I got a question on my Instagram. It was in a private message yesterday, and it was a mama with a bunch of little ones, and she asked me, "How do I fit prepping into my already busy life? How do you fit prepping in? Your mom with lots of littles."
To me, it's just normal, and like I was talking about earlier, for me, prepping looks a lot like short term food storage, and so it looks a lot like when I'm at the grocery store and I see something on sale that we use on a regular basis, then I buy multiple of that. And, it's just kind of watching out for sales and looking at what we use on a regular basis and making sure we have a lot of that on hand. Right now is a busy time of life for me. And so, realistically, canning and all of that isn't really in the plans because I have a hard enough time just trying to keep my house picked up, let alone trying to do something that's an all day process. And so it's giving yourself grace. It's letting yourself do what you can with what you're able to, and then letting the rest of it go.
I think sometimes so often we look at social media and Instagram and Facebook and Pinterest and all of these things, and as women we're just like, "Oh my gosh, look at all these beautiful pictures, and that is life." And that is so not life. And I try really hard on my Instagram to be real. I think yesterday in my stories, I'm like, "Here's my massively dirty laundry room." And I feel like your Instagram is really just real and grounded in reality as well. What do you think about that topic?
I agree. And I think that was something that I wanted when I started the Instagram account was showing people real life. Because, like you said, there are a lot of things out there that are not real life, and for me, it's always helped when I've seen influencers, especially with young kids, because it can get honestly really demoralizing having young kids. And I'm a stay at home mom, so I'm around these kids all the time. And it can get so demoralizing. And it was always a breath of fresh air for me when I saw an Instagrammer who has a dirty laundry room, who has dishes in the sink, who is in over their head with children and life and the house. And so that was my big thing when I started the account is I was like, I don't want to exactly show all my vulnerabilities and all the places that I'm lacking, but I'm also not going to hide it either.
At least at the time of this recording, a lot of people are talking about the concept of normalizing preparedness. I don't know if that'll still be what we're all talking about when this airs, but what do you think about normalizing preparedness, and how do you normalize preparedness to those that are within your circle and your friend group and your family?
For me, normalizing preparedness is just basically adding on to what you already do. If you know that you have a favorite meal or a favorite thing that you do, then make sure you have enough of that to sustain you for however long that you want. And so that's what I try to do as a prepper and everything is trying to keep our normal life as normal as possible, no matter what's going on in the outside world. And so, I don't know, I think that's just what normalizing preparedness looks like for me, is just making sure you can live your normal life despite the outside world and what's going on in the government, what's going on with Mother Nature and all of this stuff. It's just being able to create that sense of security and peace within the walls of your home.
There's a huge influx of women who are starting to research preparedness and prepping. What are some tips that you would give a new prepper?
I would say tips is look at what you do and use on a regular basis, and take inventory of that. Keep a little notes in your phone or whatever of like, okay, on a regular basis, I use dish soap. On a regular basis, I use toilet paper. On a regular basis, I use toothpaste, and making sure that you have the things you use regularly, have that on stock. It saves so much time and energy and brain power and money and, having all those things is so much more than just having it for just in case, or for doomsday. It's having your normal preps handy so you don't have to be like, oh my gosh, I'm out of toothpaste. What am I going to do? In the morning when we're rushing out the door to school, it's like, well, I'll just go in the closet and get another thing of toothpaste.
What is the most important thing that you have learned about preparing for natural disasters and weather events?
The most important thing I've learned is to expect the unexpected and to expect things to take longer than you think they will. You know, Humans are typically self-centered, and when there's a natural disaster or the grid goes down or anything like that, people only focus on themselves, and then they get mad when the government and people aren't coming to help them, and I mean, I would get the frustration. But at the same time, if you look at it from, and this is something I learned as an EMT, is if you're in a mass casualty situation, you're going to go to the most amount of people who need your help. And you're not going to worry about the one, off in no man's land, because you have to worry about the most amount of people in a catastrophic thing. And that's horrible for the one out in no man's land. But that's the reality of it. And so, if, say, in an earthquake situation, if the epicenter is 40 miles away from you and it happens to be in the biggest city in your area, well, FEMA and Red Cross and all of these government agencies and outside help are going to go to the hardest hit areas. But that means that people who are outside of that hardest hit area, who may have been hit hard, just not as hard, they have to wait even longer for resources. And that's just the reality of it. And so that's what I've wanted to do in my preparedness, is be like, I want to be able to survive until help can come, and chances are help isn't coming as soon as I want it. And I get a little irritated at 72-hour kits, because if you are living on your 72-hour kits, yeah, that's great. It'll get you 3 days. But in a situation where people are living on their 72-hour kits, you're going to need so much more than 72 hours worth of supplies. And 72-hour kits, that's a great starting off point. But 72-hour kits aren't just one and done, because chances are you're looking at a month to 2 months of, life not being normal and without groceries and without, I think, with, I don't know when this airs, but I think Louisiana, after Hurricane Ida came through, I still think they're without power. And they're going on over a month without power. And that's with so many resources in that area, And so people think that help will be coming in 3 days. But chances are help's not coming. And if help is there in 3 days, it's not just going to be you they're focusing on. They're trying to focus on the mass amount of people. And so they may have tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people that they are working with. And you are just one of hundreds of thousands of people. And, it's not just about you, even though you naturally think it's just about you.
Yeah, I think that, yeah, I just agree.
Hopefully I got rambling, but I'm very passionate. I'm very passionate about that topic because, people think, well, FEMA will just bail me out, or American Red Cross will just bail me out. Well, you and 100,000 other people, so it's going to take time.
And I am of the let's run from the FEMA bus mindset. So I'm like, yeah, no, stay away. No, thank you. I got it. That is where we are slightly opposite. And it's
Yeah.
okay because I love it.
Well, and I think that as a prepper, the more you prep, the more you run away from the FEMA bus. The more you run away from that, because you kind of understand what you're getting yourself into in situations like that. You understand that you're just one in 100,000, and you understand all the loopholes. And because it is a government ran agency, and I'm not, I don't talk politics or government because it's just
Mhm.
annoying, but it's the truth. And but I hear a lot of people, especially people who live in a city, where they think, well, all I have to do is wait for the government to come bail me out, or FEMA to come bail me out. And it's like, yeah, in theory that's a great idea, but guess what, it's not going to work that way.
So you have shared a lot about how your preparedness fits into just your everyday life. Do you have any prepper must-have items that you were like, people should have these things, that are maybe not, toothpaste and toilet paper?
For me, it's things that I think people must have are, well, maybe I'll just share what I think I need. And that is because we live where it's cold. It snows, and I hate being cold. So for me, a must have is a lot of layers and space heaters and a Mr. Buddy propane heater and propane and things like that. So for me, that is a must have. For my husband, he really does not want to be without power. And so for him, a must have is making sure we have plenty of flashlights and batteries and solar lights. And, we recently just bought a generator with our tax return. It's looking at what are your biggest fears if the grid went down and you're just surviving with what you have. What are the things you're most worried about? And then fixing that worry.
A lot of people, and myself included in that, we talk a lot about skills and skills that preppers should have. What are some skills that you think are important in emergency preparedness?
There's so many skills, and you can always be learning. You can always be growing and learning new skills. And so to just narrow it down to what skills should people have, I don't know. I don't know what skills people have. I think my best advice for skills is look at what you have and use and do, and make sure that you can do all of those things in different circumstances. So making sure that you have the skills and the know-how to do laundry if you don't have a laundry or a washer and a dryer. Making sure that you can stay warm if you don't have power. Making sure that you can cook food if you don't have a microwave, or if you have an electric stove or anything like that, making sure that you can, it's having skills that can keep your life running and functioning if the power goes out or the grid goes down or anything happens.
I think that, just as moms and as women, we do a lot of different tasks every single day. And asking that question, how would I do this without power or without running water, is important because we don't know when whatever event is going to happen that may leave us without power for 2 weeks. So, yeah, I totally agree. I think that was a great answer. What is something that I should ask you that I don't know enough about you to ask? Or is there anything else that you would like to share with us today before we close?
I just want to help people help themselves, and help people who are overwhelmed and who are, if it's something that I'm passionate about, but it overwhelms somebody else, then I want to use my knowledge and my power and my passion to help the people who are overwhelmed and who don't think it's as fun to think about an earthquake taking out all your power for several months. Like, so to some people, they just don't find that nearly as fun and amusing as I do.
Thank you so much for just sharing with us today and sharing your journey and just all about being a practical prepper. And where can people find you online?
So really, I'm just on Instagram. I created the account a whole month ago, so at the end of August. So, it's just, that's just where I'm at, is at Prepared Like a Mother on Instagram. And that's it. I'm happy to, if people have questions or concerns or whatever, they can always message me on there. And I'm happy to help just because I love it and it's fun.
Yeah, that is one thing I love about the community of preppers on Instagram. Everyone is so willing to help and answer questions, and specifically the women who prep community over there. I think just over the last several months, I have watched it grow considerably. And anytime a new account comes along, I'm like, oh, who is this? What are they doing? Oh, look at that. I feel a little bit like a stalker. But your account is great and I love your posts, and I love seeing, your family and your little kids because I don't have any. So yeah, thank you so much for being on today. It has just been a great conversation and I really appreciate you.
Well, thank you for letting me ramble and just getting my voice out there a little bit, because that's all I want to do, is just help people help themselves, because I think we're facing so much uncertainty right now that a lot of people are scared. And I think that's why you've seen such an influx of, women who prep and, just people who prep, because there is so much uncertainty. And I think with, COVID and the economy and all of the scary things that happens when you turn on any news station, whether, whichever direction you lean, you know, it's scary. It's a scary, uncertain time. And I think people are realizing that. And I just want to kind of give a voice to, yes, it's scary, but here's how we can plan and prepare even though it's scary. And then all of a sudden, it doesn't become as scary. It can still be terrifying, and I can still find myself in a state of anxiety and worry. But it helps, I use that anxiety and worry to make myself more self-reliant instead of, relying on outside sources.
That's great. It's prepared, not scared is a hashtag that a lot of people use over there. And I was like, that is so true. Well, thank you again. And listeners, I hope that you enjoyed today's episode and that you were able to take some of that information and process that into an action step for yourself in your own preparedness journey. Thanks so much for listening today. And until next time, remember, every little thing matters and a goal without a plan is just a wish. If you have questions, you can find me on Instagram at thispreparedlife. I'd love to connect with you over there. You can also find me on the internet at www.thispreparedlife.com. And if you enjoyed today's podcast, I would love it if you would leave me a review on Apple Podcasts.